Okay, so I think I saw most of the people here are not young anymore. So one of the problems is when we're getting old, actually our brain cognitive ability actually gradually slow down. And so one of the issue is that when we're starting to actually getting slower down, this actually cognitive ability, if you look at the curve, actually decline at the age of 25. So it's starting to go down actually about 1% per year. So our executive function, flexibility, episodic memory decline with aging. So that's really one of the biggest problems. I mean, the people talk about the longevity. Actually, it's probably more important to think about the brain health. If we can live long, but if we actually cannot function anymore, so what's the point of having a life? So that's really the issue. Now, actually, then, what is how to solve this problem? So unlike the digital technology, I have to say that biotech is pretty slow. It took 20 years, many years work. So one of the things actually we figured out is our basically communication device in brain is called a device called Synapse. It's essentially brain is made of 10 billion neurons, trillions of synapses. So those synapses actually are, the problem here is the synapse starting to lose during the aging. So there's also about 1% loss of synapse during the aging. So here is what we do at the MIT lab. So we're focused on what really makes synapse loss. So there's zillions, it's about 10,000 molecules actually under each synapse. So we try to figure out what really make them actually lose synapse during the aging. So after many, many years of work, finally actually we found a compound which actually can increase synapse density in culture system. So then another 10 years work, actually we developed a compound where we can actually increase give to animal. And we found we can increase synapse density in animal after like 2 or 3 weeks. And so that's exciting. However, the problem is that in the neuroscience, there's 2 areas of translational research actually transfer from animal study to human is weak. One is cancer research. You heard so many compound works, and when you get to human, it doesn't work. Another area of poorly translation is actually a neuroscience area, neurology area. So in this case, we conduct a human clinical trial. Actually, then we give the patients who have a memory a problem. And after 3 weeks, and we saw their overall cognitive ability starting to improve. Now, you saw those bars, then how much is improved? So then we're getting back to this, the curve, we show what is going on with their brain aging. So the people who go to our clinical trial, their cognitive ability, if we evaluate it by the cognitive score, is about 70 years old. So after 2 months of the treatment with our brain supplement, and then they're actually brain aging, they're bring back about 10 years of their, restore their brain capability by about 10 years. So, okay, so so this is really actually what we have done, and now the compound is endogenous, has passed FDA regulation, and be useful for normal human. Now we also start to conduct human clinical trial. We finished one recently at Stanford University, show the compound actually is also equally effective to restore the cognitive function of Alzheimer's patients. So that is really our ultimate goal. Thank you.
I think then it's Tom.
We're going to switch very quickly to talk about not dementia and aging, but mental health, which tends to actually be a problem of early life. 75% of mental illnesses start by age 25. In fact, these are the chronic diseases of young people, not just in the United States, but globally. One of the things that's so striking about this group of disorders is the high morbidity. Sometimes for people under the age of 50, in most countries, these are the disorders with the highest morbidity, and also high mortality. We lose about 3 times more people to suicide than homicide. There are more suicide deaths than deaths from breast cancer, prostate cancer, more deaths from suicide than traffic fatalities. It's an extraordinary public health problem, almost all due to the presence of mental illness, often in young people. And what's most egregious about this set of issues is how little progress we've been able to make. So we've been thinking at my company, Mindstrong Health, for the last 4 months that we've been in existence about how we can have some impact on this problem, which has been refractory to so many other innovations that people have tried, from new therapies to new drugs to new devices. And the place where we decided we're really struggling is that we don't have good data. We don't have good measurement, that we don't manage what we don't measure. And if we're going to make progress here, it's going to have to be through more objective measurement, allowing us to identify problems early and ultimately develop better ways of diagnosing these disorders, which we don't do a good job on today. So what would be the perfect measurement tool? Well, we could do, and you'll hear about neuroimaging as an opportunity. You could think about genomics. You could think about a whole range of biochemical kinds of tests. But it's been difficult, and I've spent about $20 billion of your money when I was at NIMH to try to get each of those developed. And I must say, I don't think we succeeded. We may still succeed, but the perfect tool is going to be something that is cheap, ubiquitous, passive, and gives us objective measures. And we couldn't ask for something better than what you have in your pocket, the smartphone. 3 billion of them in circulation, 6 billion predicted by 2020. And the beautiful thing here is that this is a global solution for a group of disorders that are not just first world problems. We're looking for global solutions. For the first time, we have an opportunity to use this distributed computer to try to assess behavior at scale. The way we do it is called digital phenotyping. We collect 3 kinds of information: sensors from your phone, activity, location, social behavior, your voice, which can tell you something about both prosody and coherence, and most important for us is keyboard interaction, the human-computer interface, which has an enormous amount of information, which we can interpret through machine learning to give us this digital phenotype. Essentially, what this is, then, is a passive, objective, continuous, and ubiquitous solution that gives us deep information about individual behavior in the real world. This will ultimately give us, we believe, the ways to predict relapse and recovery from depression, the ways to predict who's at high risk for suicide, and ultimately will give us a new diagnostic system as well as a new assessment system. Does it work? We've done 3 clinical trials that are completed. The data here are from one of those trials showing that when you do 3 to 4 hours of intensive neuropsychological assessment in people and then have them carry their phones for a year, and you look at the best features you can pull out from this digital phenotyping, the correlation with these gold standard measures from neuropsychological testing are about as good as the test-retest variance on those measures. That is to say that we now have a ubiquitous, passive, longitudinal assessment that could serve as a surrogate for what we do in the laboratory under highly controlled conditions. Pretty extraordinary because this costs nothing, and we could do this in 3 billion people today. So what the company's about now is to take this and find out whether something that we now know is feasible and that we are already collecting data from in research studies actually makes a difference in clinical care. So we're putting this into large studies with provider networks, with public mental health systems, to try to create this pattern of early biomarkers that we think can be predictive. As it says here, these are obviously massively scalable. We think that there's an opportunity here to integrate with other kinds of information to, for the first time, use this kind of digital phenotype to attack that biggest problem that we've had in this whole space, which is objective measurement. And so for the first time, we'll take this whole field of psychiatry and provide it with the kinds of tools that we've had for years in cardiology and diabetes and infectious disease to begin to bring some kind of rigor to a field in which morbidity and mortality are high, so far refractory to change, and yet we believe are finally at a point where we can begin to make a big difference, not just in the developed world, but globally. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm John Kelley. When Safa asked if we would be to come and present, we were very much honored. So rather than get into the technical side of what we do and tying together what Dr. Liu had described, I thought for sure we would go down something everybody would be familiar with, and that was wine. Over good wine, we've had some great inspirational things, but as it relates to the brain, we began to think through as an analogy about sommeliers and the quality of wines and the progress of the types of varietals and the conditions that are prevalent in Argentina and Spain and the US and France. And what we began to find is a lot of multivariables that around the quality of the wine and the ability of sommeliers to distinguish between those. Very intuitive, very subjective, but also very scientific. So like fine wine, the brain is much like that, and we're discovering new things along the way as it relates to things like wine. There are a lot of different processes that have been used through the years, going back 5,000 BC. Each of these specialties have become siloed. There are specific characteristics of each region and techniques that they use, and each of the wines themselves are distinctive. So is the human brain. So the ability to take massive data and be able to come up with interesting information, as Tom suggested, is really around the power of the individual and the ability of specialists to bore in on those individuals and ferret out neurological, psychiatric, genetics, proteomic kinds of information. An experienced sommelier, much like an experienced psychiatrist or neurologist, is truly an artist. We've seen that in action. What are the key learnings and processes that each of those psychiatrists and neurologists use to ferret out information? As Tom suggested, there are a lot of ways to start collecting that information. In the case of an individual, and for a company like Sarascan, we began to accumulate doctors and specialists from the psychiatry, neurology, and radiology field to try to tease out these complex brain issues and brain disorders. And why were they in existence? What could be the kinds of things that would be able to be employed in order to find out that information? Neuroimaging for certain genotype, phenotype, family history, event history. I was drafted during the Vietnam War, and while there were a lot of stresses of my peers, something that came about was the whole Agent Orange phenomena, and it was either hidden or not understood until more information was accumulated from those people. Unfortunately, in many cases, that led to death or brain disorder impairments that allowed the people not to have a satisfactory life. So when you go after an individual, the power of bringing all those specialists together for one individual is tremendous. Can you help diagnose? If you can, as Tom suggested, if you know what the problem or problems are, you have a better chance of either treating or measuring that treatment. And that's great for the individual. But what about if you can accumulate that detailed information for the masses? So the product set that we have is a Palantir-like pattern matching capability that takes from Dr. Liu's specialty and from the psychiatry specialty and starts looking for patterns that may be distinctive to the individual. And it's really based around how much more information can you get from each individual. The power of one contributes to the power of many, and the power of many contribute back to the ability of the professional to do their job. In our case, we became able now to take and do over 4,100 different patients, accumulating their information from their medical professionals, from their pediatric records, from their military records, from their event history records, in biomarkers in the form of proteomics, looking for patterns that begin to help the doctors zero in on what might be comorbid or areas that could be indicative of a particular type of disease. And as the number of people grow, as Tom suggested, we start providing predictive analytics and then hoping to unveil precision medicine and then measurement. And maybe more importantly, quality of life for the individual, quality of life, and maybe preventative care. In our case, we are taking standard information on symptomology. So whatever the symptomologies might be, whether those are tests from the military or from the leading psychiatrist, neuroimaging, imaging that ends up going down to the cluster cell, measuring metabolic or blood perfusion rates at a statistical level that sets the stage for measurement on corresponding regions of that brain over time after treatment. Excuse me. With that, we're able then to go and pull systems to take a look at various conditions and provide automated tools online, Amazon cloud-based, that allow doctors or professionals anywhere in the world at low cost to have access to the best information in the world. After all, we really do want quality of life. And if we can get preventative medicine in place, perhaps all of us who may have or may experience things like Alzheimer's will have that quality we all deserve. Thank you.
Great. All right. Before I go on, I wanted to mention also the name of the drug that Guosong mentioned that is already FDA approved as a supplement, the one that reverses 15 years of brain aging, just because I know my friends like it. So it's called Clarimem, so C-L-A-R-I-M-E-M. It's, from my point of view, the most important brain changing and brain aging reversal agent that is out there that most people don't know about. So great. So I'm going to talk about new science of awakening. And this is basically a topic I've been obsessed with my whole life, okay? Spiritual development, transformation, because I have known for years that when you look at human history, right, there's individuals that go on change human history. They're geniuses, if you will. They discover new continents. They achieve transcendental states of well-being and so forth, right? And for thousands of years, we've known this, right? And then there's the rest of us, right? So, and if you look at the neurophysiology, if you look at the brain structures, even people have analyzed Einstein's brain, there isn't huge differences, okay? The hardware is for the most part the same. Like, you know, the effect of individual genes on mental outcomes is really, really tiny. So I've been obsessed with, like, what is going on? Why is there these enormous differences? What is it about the software, some brains, that make it, you know, people are in blissful states, are creative, can achieve extraordinary things, and the rest of us, like, you know, struggling to lose 10 pounds, right? So what's going on there? So I'm going to do a little quick exercise for you guys, okay? So because I want this to be relevant for you as well, even though we're speaking about science as well. I want you to think about the most perfect state of being you could imagine, okay? Like, think if you're in paradise, okay? Like, what would that be like? Would that be joyful? Would that be easy? Would that be blissful? Would that be... And by the way, you don't need to take notes. I'm providing all of this for free. There's a book that we're releasing. I'll give you the link at the end. You can download it. It's all in there. Okay? So I'd love you to just pay attention. So you're going to enjoy it more. So just think of, like, what is the most perfect state of being you can imagine? Joy, creativity, well-being, connectedness. Just take a moment. Let that play in. Okay? How does that feel like in your body? That feels great, right? And remember a time you felt like that? Okay? You guys got it? Yeah? Anyone who doesn't have it, raise your hand. Okay, you got it. Okay, you work harder on it. Okay, so now ask yourself, how much of your day are you in that state? How many seconds, minutes are you in that state? 0, yeah. So if you look at, actually, for most people, so people say that Einstein said that we only use 10% of our capacity. Actually, based on my studies for the last 40 years in neuroscience medicine, I think we use actually 0.01% of our brain. And basically, you've just demonstrated to yourself you're using about 0.01% of your capacity for well-being, okay? People have shown this for creativity and other things as well. But, you know, if you're at 0.01%, there's a lot of place to go. So I'm going to share with you about my journey. Then I'm going to share with you this kind of new science of awakening and also very practical tools you can apply to your life. So this is my objective. Some people are interested in terraforming Mars. I'm very excited about awakening Earth, okay? And so, yes, are we excited about that? Yes, okay. Because, look, I don't want to be on Mars if I'm with a bunch of unawakened people, like, locked in there, lost. Like, God help us, right? So we're going to need the same kind of infrastructure, the same kind of science, the same kind of a collective action, the companies and so forth, to awaken Earth. So that's what we're doing, and I'll talk about that then. So why did I become really interested in this, right? Well, personally, I was obsessed with it, but also there's a very interesting situation, okay? There's a little typo there, but it's all good. So current situation is we've spent the last 50 years understanding meditation and yoga. We've gotten obsessed with it. And every study we do, we find out that it has amazing effects. Dementia, depression, blood pressure. I mean, it's like this wonder cure, right? If this was a drug, it would be like $1 trillion drug, right? But then, when you actually go and categorize everything we know about awakening, okay, thousands of years of R&D of human history, the rest of it is like a mystery to us. Like, so I listed a bunch of things here that are incredibly powerful, I've experienced, but you could take that list and go like 100 stories down, and there's that much amount of technology, knowledge that's been developed that is sitting in people's heads around the world, and it's completely disorganized. There's no science around it. There's no sense. If we take, it took us 40, 50 years to get meditation and yoga. If we take as long for the rest of it, it'll take us like 2,000 years to. So we need to accelerate this whole process. Before we go, and I love the brain-machine interfaces, and I know they're going to be amazing, but let's also use this incredible treasure trove of information that we have. So here's my starting point. The only way to know this stuff is actually through self-experience, truly, right? You know, we are, so I'll tell you a little bit myself, always been obsessed with human nature, trained as a medical doctor at Harvard, trained as a neuroscientist at MIT. I've studied most spiritual paths and most religious paths. I was at McKinsey and Company because I was interested in understanding human systems and a serial entrepreneur. And I had a whole bunch of issues that I needed to handle, right? So I had severe clinical depression. I spent a year in bed. I couldn't get out. It was obsessing. Several chronic medical issues that were very painful and difficult. Now, I went through an incredibly accelerated journey, okay? So over 9 months, and this could be made into like an epic movie at some point, but use 73 different existing awakening techniques that cover techniques like muscle therapy, pulse electromagnetic therapy, talk therapy, all kinds of medicines, things you've never heard about, things you have heard about, combining both a relentlessness as well as a very scientific mindset of safety and just using the things that are right. So kind of an unusual combination. Discovered 172 new techniques of my own through contemplation, okay? And then when I was reading these ancient texts and so forth, I found out that 33 of those 172 already existed. So there was like independent discovery, which was awesome. I experienced 82 ego death events. Okay, this is very interesting. There's just a neuroscience field being built around it over the last 10 years. Basically, what happens during an ego dissolution event, if you've never experienced it, is your identity, okay, for a few minutes, just kind of unwinds, okay? You're basically, I have some nodding heads, it's awesome. And basically, for the first moment in your life, you experience to be, not have to carry the weight of your identity. Liberating, people experience love, bliss, it's amazing. But what's really interesting is when that happens, you drop out. When this thing unwinds, all kinds of traumas and things that are built in drop down, okay? And when you come out of it, you have this sense of awareness, creativity, genius, happiness, that you're like, I wish I was in this state all the time, okay? So I went through 82 of this. It was just epic beyond description, but it was very challenging too, very harrowing, but with tremendous states of bliss as well. What happened, okay? Cured my depression. It's gone, okay? This is amazing, okay? It's completely gone. I also had pretty severe anxiety. It's gone, okay? I had a really painful chronic medical condition where I had 9 out of 10 pain about a third of the time, okay? Really excruciating, okay? I won't go into it, TMI, but, and basically the only option was to do surgery with side effects and so forth. By handling the software, the chronic medical condition gets solved. I've seen people with my own eyes with severe psoriasis, autoimmune disorders clear out completely, okay? And there's a whole field of science developed around that. I had a high C-reactive protein, which is actually a marker of inflammation in the blood, high risk factor. Above 3 is considered high risk. I was at 10, it became 0.9. And business-wise, everything exploded. Over 9 months, I founded a tech company that reduces the cost of starting a nonprofit by 98%, so new technology. Now I started a holding company, has now 5 companies underneath it to build scalable, profitable companies that change the world, mental health and so forth. I mean, creativity, like tapping into unique talent just like went to a whole different level. And from a happiness standpoint, it's very interesting. I've experienced what people call samadhi states, which is these states of pure bliss. But what's fascinating is after 14 years of business and so forth, I still get challenges and problems that, and some of them are difficult, but I'm doing it from a pure state of well-being, and I'm like, yeah, this is amazing, we're going to have fun. And some of these things are complicated presentation. I'm like, wow, okay, cool, let's do this. It's a very different wavelength, okay? And so I consider that I've had a 500x improvement across things. So I've gone from 0.01% to 5%. Okay. So the space for improvement is massive. Okay. Now, usually, if you look at history, if people are lucky, it takes 20 to 30 years to have had the kind of path that I went through. Okay. Most people like go through life and so forth. Why does this happen? The reason is that we spend the first 4 decades of our life when I call about human OS 1.0. Okay. Basically, we're imitating or rejecting what we see around us. Okay, we just like plug along. We get to our like late 30s, early 40s, and we're like, well, this wasn't all that it was, clammed up to be, right? And we're like, well, there must be more. Okay, so that's part of the reason. The other reason is that there's such a vast amount of techniques, gurus, technologies, approaches. Every person you talk with, friends, this person, this. You should do this. You should do that. You should do that. You should do that. And it's extremely confusing. And people can, by doing the wrong technique with the wrong person, they can actually set themselves back by years or decades because they've had bad experience. So there is no way to, how does it all fit together? Okay? So what I'm presenting today for the first time is a universal theory of awakening. Okay? That basically, and by the way, the book that you're going to be able to download back, it goes into detail. You can apply it and so forth. Okay? It basically synthesizes everything we know about awakening in a way that is very easy to understand, is very practical, and enables scientific studies to be done. So one way to understand ourselves is that, well, this is an image. Imagine like you're in the middle. You're like the supercomputer, this quantum supercomputer that has all these capabilities, which your brain is, right? 100 billion neurons, the most sophisticated piece of hardware we know in the solar system. And basically, there's really 3 parts. I'm going to touch on it very quickly. To actually understand it, you got to read it and go into detail. But there's really, if you think about a computer, it has actually 3 components, right? So receiving is the inputs into the system, the knowledge, the information, okay, from all your sources of information. Now, we all have tons of filters. We're not aware of this consciously that are blocking us from getting that information. You're only aware of about 5% of what is going on in your brain. Neuroscientific studies show this, 5 to 10%. You're only actually consciously aware of 5 to 10%. So if you're not receiving information, you just don't have access to what you need, rewards, information. Then there's the outputs of the system, where it actually turns out that unconditional giving is actually very critical for this process. And then in the wiring, we all have different sorts of resistance, okay? So think about it as emotional traumas, or for instance, frameworks that we've been taught to think about the world through in schooling and work, or seriousness, like the need to do planning and so forth. And what happens is that for each one of these, there's technologies that you can actually use and tools. Some of them are very simple, things that you can do at home easily, which I cover, as well as some of the things that are very radical, right? Which are mind-blowing, right? And so what each one of these does is that basically the objective, this kind of to get the maximum awakening, is you basically increase receiving, okay? Inputs into the system, information maximization for the neuroscientists in the room. You maximize your unconditional giving, but it has to be done in a very specific way for it to be effective, and you lower your resistance, okay? Now, this seems very conceptually simple, but there's a lot of ways in which people get it wrong. This is why awakening is rare and it ends up taking 20, 30 years, okay? So I'll just give you like one very, very simple example, a little flavor of one of them. So for unconditional giving, the mistake that 99% people make is they're focused on unconditional giving to others, okay, as opposed to themselves, okay? And your psyche, your consciousness, it's a muscle, doesn't know the difference, okay? So there's very specific exercises you can do. If you're doing that, you're not going to end up in the right place, okay? Also, for instance, for resistance, there's very cool tools, like in 1 minute, okay, by uttering certain words, you can release blocks. I call them rapid awakening technologies, okay? In 1 or 2 minutes, you can utter this, and like whatever block you're feeling at the moment is gone, okay? Then there's also tools for more radical transformation. One of them, Bufo Alvarez, which is actually in animal medicine, has been described by Stanislav Grof as the future, which is the founder of psychedelic science, as the future of psychiatry, okay? So there's enormous amount of content that is very powerful, and this tool actually helps kind of bring it all together. Okay, so you can apply it, there's 20, 30 years of development in a year. And I want to share a little bit about the things I'm working on so people can be involved, as well as the link to download this. So if you want to get this good stuff, you should take a picture of this shot. So I'll start on the right, which is the book A New Science of Awakening. We're releasing it for free, so you can go and download it, and basically harmonizes and brings everything together of the last several thousand years of history and awakening technologies. and with all the different benefits. And by the way, we're sharing with people over time more in text and exercises. We're making it available for free for the people in this conference, as well as your friends. So that's good. For people who want to be involved in things I'm running, so Lightstar is a company mentioned. One of the amazing things that happened over the last year is they developed this company that generates companies that are profitable and highly scalable. So for instance, we're launching a global network of breakthrough mental health centers so that people can go in and cure the depression, anxiety, and so forth using the latest technologies, okay? And they can have an accelerator, combining modern technology with ancient wisdom, right? We're working with Guosong on the MIT drug that reverses 15 years of brain aging, doing things in cryptocurrency, new health systems, building a system to use musical therapy, which is, by the way, is very effective for depression and anxiety, but doing it in a way that physicians can prescribe it and insurance companies can cover it. In other words, an antidepressant with no safety risk, right? So a lot of very exciting things. Giving, which is a technology company in the philanthropy world, which reduces 98% of the cost of reducing a nonprofit. By the way, for people who are interested in this space, I recently, part of tapping into my own talents, we recently developed a new technology that very credibly could solve 50% of the remaining philanthropic needs of the planet in a scalable and profitable way, which is amazing. So if that's an area of passion, and then I mentioned the book. Thank you so much. So let's have a little time for conversations and exploration. I'll tell you what I'm most curious about, as being people who are very knowledgeable in this field, who spent your lives understanding it. Love the stuff that you shared with us. I would like to know, what is the one technology outside of the work that you're doing, technologies you've seen other people do, that make you go, wow, that is really fantastic and interesting. I'd be curious to try it. Or you've tried it and you've seen great effects from it. In the spirit of kind of sharing things that might help people experience their own breakthroughs and their own opportunities in their own life.
There's a company called Savonix here in the Bay Area that does.
How do you spell it?
Savonix. Their breakthrough from our perspective is Z-score analysis of neural and cognitive testing results. And why that might be important is that you can start providing statistics for areas or regions of the brain that seem to be, as Tom would suggest, psychiatrically oriented. So that sets the groundwork for other pieces like proteomics or imaging, what have you, to start converging together for better predictive analytics. I think the Z-score component, in my opinion, is a breakthrough.
So it gives you like a kind of a mental scan of your cognitive function across the board.
Yeah, a little less subjective. Not that the subjectivity is lost, but math is a good thing.
Yep. Great.
So, Safa, we're in the assessment space. I think a really interesting area for the future of mental health care is going to be digital interventions.
Yeah.
And in that space, there are probably several hundred companies that have jumped in. The one that I think is really intriguing is a company that I call the Airbnb of mental health, or the Lyft or Uber of mental health. And that is taking peer support and moving it online, creating an entirely alternate mental health care system, using kind of the AA model, but doing it virtually, creating communities, allowing anybody anywhere to join. The company is called 7 Cups. They have over 1 million users each month. They're growing about 20% month on month, going viral. It's all free. It's all on demand, and it's all based on connectivity and community. And it's pretty interesting that what they're able to do in a way that involves no bricks and mortar. And I guess it reminds us that of all the areas where tech may affect healthcare, it's in mental health care where just having a phone gives you both the diagnostic side and the opportunity for really powerful therapeutics as well.
It's interesting, actually. I think I just heard Tom's company. I found, maybe because of the stage we are, I think his company, in my view, is very interesting to me. What happened is we just have found a compound where we can enhance cognitivity of normal human and normal people, and also the in disease population. So one of the biggest challenges actually in this domain is very funny. That is typically it goes to drug development, and that costs, on average, develop a drug for Alzheimer's about $5 billion. Okay, so that's unlike the software industry, the innovation is very difficult. It's burning a lot of money and a lot of failure. On the other hand, is the nutraceutical space where people should supposed to eat correctly, right? Now the problem with the nutraceutical space is that how do you know this stuff is really not an Indian snake oil salesman out of advertisement, right? So that's the challenge. I think to me, the one way to solve that problem is, the stuff like you're doing. If we can objectively actually show your cognitive ability, right? And then that open the door for us actually to say, we are real science, right? We can actually deliver real stuff. So that allows the real science actually to be successful. So I think what you're doing is very invaluable, to someone like us. Without those evaluation tool, what are we going to do? Only thing we can do is really a serious clinical trial. Each trial costs $100 million.
I think we got to start working together.
True, definitely.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
This is how our panels work. We start things here, right here. And actually, we realized John and I are going to work together and collaborating for developing technologies for consciousness metrics, right? I have another question. It's kind of like a big question. Just a couple of years ago, our president spoke about the opioid crisis, right? Huge problem across the country. I actually read that the UN determined that depression alone is the #1 cause of disability worldwide. #1 cause of disability, more than war, terrorism, poverty, anything, okay? So just going to put out a big question out there. We have these very smart brains here and good-hearted leaders. What are the things that should happen, could happen, just as kind of big picture thinking, that could be critical for moving to solving these huge problems in our society, in the world overall? Is it around, just some thoughts, I think about it, is it around that we're not economically incentivizing outcomes? Or is it that the therapies that we have are helping treat as opposed to cure things? Is it because, the economics, the pharma economics are such? And would love your thoughts around what are the causes of this, and what are perhaps things that we could be thinking about or focusing on to help bring well-being to the world?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in first. I think what makes this problem particularly vexing is that, in contrast to lots of areas of medicine, we have pretty good treatments here. Antidepressants really do work for 30 to 50% of people very well. Psychotherapies work for about the same number of people, often a different group of people. So these things are actually remarkably effective. There's still 20% of people who don't respond overall, and that's a lot because it's a highly prevalent disorder. But there's no question that for most people, we can help them enormously. So the real problem is, why isn't that happening? Why is it that for a disease that we know how to treat, so few people are in treatment? And there are a couple of reasons. The usual reason that policy folks will give you is that there's a problem with access. The insurance doesn't cover, so we need parity. There's no one available nearby at the time when somebody needs them. All of that is true. I think there are problems with what I call the quantity of care. For depression, there's also a huge problem with the quality of care. That many of the people who provide mental health care to people with this very serious medical illness have minimal training in anything that has an evidence base to it. And we would never permit that to happen for diabetes or heart disease, but somehow that's okay here. So I think we have to focus on both quantity, access, that's where some of the technology can help, but quality as well. And on the quality side, really building in the tools through technology to set standards, make sure there's training, increasingly to also use tools like peer support to help people feel like they're part of a community of caring. And that's happening. I think we could actually bend the curve here by scaling these things up.
Yeah, I'd like to jump on that. The psychiatric side is very complex. You have environmental, you may have heredity issues, you could have things that are neurological that spin over into psychiatric symptoms. Symptoms come from many diseases. They can come from early Alzheimer's, but they can also be impacted by poisonings, toxic poisonings. So unraveling that is important. So I think the data collection and access to the population health, as he described, begins to put the basis to start ferreting out again these kinds of issues. Number two, psychiatric is moving towards the purview of the elite. It's expensive. And when you talk about a quarter of the population in the world being impacted by depression kinds of things, why is that the purview of people with money? And we're moving to that area, I think, too rapidly. Insurance reimbursement obviously is an obstacle, but I don't believe that that has to be that way, and we can warp that curve with the kinds of things that you're doing, the kinds of things we're doing. That information should be available at the psychologists, the nurse practitioners, and not just at the few psychiatry professionals that are spread throughout the world.
Awesome. And I have a question for you, John, actually, so it's a nice segue. So there's some really cool predictive powers that your technology has enabled people. Like you can take someone, scan their brain, do their blood test, and predict all kinds of awesome things about them. I remember there was a predictiveness about the likelihood of someone committing suicide. Right. Could you share a little bit about the things you're now able to predict? I understand, you know, with some reasonable level. I thought that was like incredible.
So Tom is a truly medical professional, would want to push us a little bit here on the data. But we have about 250 instances where people have identified themselves as suicidal thoughts, suicide ideation, and suicide attempts. And having their pharmaceutical history, their event history, going back to things like birth trauma, and then looking at their proteomic side of it and statistically measured brain imaging, I can tell you that anecdotally we're beginning to see inflammation in the thalamic region of the brain in one particular area. Could that be predictive about doing some things that could be preventative? Could it be that you would see a cauldron of things that might not be good? If you added Zoloft to these particular conditions, could you exacerbate the suicidal sort of things? And that's not taking a shot at the pharmaceutical, but what are the factors that are prevalent that could be pattern matched to start providing professionals with information that could be more aggressive or more positive or even more experimental?
So I'll just make a 5-second comment about that. There's a recent study that came out from Harvard that's showing that amygdala activation, which is a certain area of the brain that is related to fear, not only is connected to PTSD, but also predicts cardiac risk, heart attacks, and inflammation in the blood. So it could be very soon that you're going to go and get a scan of your brain, and you're going to be able to predict where you're at, and then the technologies that you need to use to come out. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir panelists.